You're listening to the New Story podcast from New Story Church in Kansas City. To learn more about New Story Church, visit our website at www.newstory.church.
Welcome, everybody, to the Equip Podcast. We're equipping you to live out your Christian life as you faithfully love God and love others with truth and grace. My name's Jeremy, one of the pastors here. I work with our students, creative team, stuff like that. But today I'm not alone. I am joined by our other two pastors and privileged to be with them. Say hey.
What's up?
Well, good to be with my colleagues today and to talk about things that really have eternal impact.
Agreed. And what a lot of people don't know is that on Mondays, all three of us pastors meet and talk about the week and just different things in ministry, keeping each other up to date. It's really helpful and really enjoyable. I always enjoy when we get to sit down and talk, because for a while it was just me and Dennis, but now we have a third guy in here, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and we're actually in your office right now, so it feels a lot more homier than the podcast studio is cool and everything, but it just feels like what we normally talk about. So
yeah. A change in
scenery.
Kind of, scenery helps, and also the HVAC is down in the studio, so that's why we're not up there. But yeah, I like sitting in my office too. It's kind of nice. But today we got just a couple things I want to get into, but what we're going through right now series-wise is really important. And so we're going to talk about the phases of parenting a little bit more, some different perspectives on that as well, between me, Peterson, Dennis. But you guys know how we got to start this. We can't just jump right in.
Dude, I was wondering if we were going to do this or not.
And Dennis, feel free to sit back and just enjoy the show. It is time for Riddles with Pierce.
I was literally thinking about this. I was like, surely we're not going to do this with Dennis being here.
Oh yeah, we're doing it, baby. So I've got one. We're gonna see how well you do with it, and if you nail it right out the gate, I got another one in the chamber. So
great.
And Dennis, if you know the answer, don't say anything. Just let him squirm. All right.
But then ask him after and see if he gets it right.
Okay, yeah, I can do that. Okay. Here's a question. How many times can you subtract the number 5 from the number 25?
4.
No.
Okay. So how many times can you subtract 5 from 25? So I'm subtracting...
Don't say anything, Dennis.
How many times can you subtract 5
from 25?
So 25 minus 5 once.
Why?
Because 25, and then once I take 5 away, it turns into 20. Then I'm doing 20 minus 5. So it's only once.
That's the correct answer.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I just had to think about it for a second.
So
I was thinking multiplication.
Okay. Jesus is sitting next to you. Did you see that on my computer earlier when you came and talked with me?
No, if Jesus is right here. If he was the fourth wheel on this podcast right now, we don't have a mic for him, so we'd have to give up one of ours.
He doesn't need one. He's got, Okay, well, I put a couple extras in there because I realized I came and showed you something on my computer earlier and I had it up and I was like, oh shoot, if he read that.
No, I will tell you this. Here's as your assurance. When I walk up to your computer, I don't go scanning every single thing that's open. You have like 12 tabs open.
Yeah, there's a lot open.
There's always something open, so I don't go looking and scanning everything.
Well, here, you got that. Is that what you were thinking, Dennis, or were you thinking 5?
No, I was thinking something different because you could do it an infinite number of times, because every time you write 25 down and take 5 away from it, then you could, whenever you subtract 5 from 25,
that's the big brain answer.
But
like when you're in school, or like the movies that talk about you have to rewrite something.
If you did it one day, you could do it the next day or the next minute, anyway, that was that would been my answer.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, both. You were on the right track, so I'll allow it. Here, let's do one more, just fun. That was usually you struggle through them. This one, I really liked this one. Okay, this one we'll see how you are at math. Okay.
If you don't use it, you lose it.
And I don't use it. There's a 300-foot train. 300-foot train traveling at 300 feet per minute.
Okay.
300-foot train traveling at 300 feet per minute. It needs to go through a 300-foot tunnel. How long does it take for the train to get through the tunnel?
Okay, so it's 60 seconds in a minute. I know
Good
that.
job. Good job.
So it's a 300-foot train needs to make it through a 300-foot tunnel.
Traveling at 300 feet per minute.
So when the front of the train starts, that's the countdown.
Mhm.
We're getting through this.
Mhm. Do you know it, Dennis? Do you think you got it?
I think it's one.
One
I
minute?
think it's 1 minute.
That's not correct.
All right, I'm gonna say 3 minutes.
That's not correct. So think about when the nose punches through the start of the tunnel. How
Right, the
long
tunnel.
will it take for it to get to the nose to get to the end of the tunnel?
So it takes. Okay, so
How long will that take?
1
1 minute. It's not through though, is it? It's
3
currently
So
inside
it'd have to be
the tunnel.
2 minutes
2 minutes
Oh, I still
to
don't
get
get it.
through.
to get through.
To get through it.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. Now you got
gotta
it.
get. Yeah, I'm there now, guys. So
Yeah.
1 minute for the front to reach the other side.
1
but
minute
the
for it to be
back-
fully in, and
Yeah.
another minute to be fully out.
Yeah, fully out.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there you go.
Yeah, I didn't get it. Once you got it, I still didn't get it. I
Hey.
went around it, so I don't. 3 minutes still would work.
I mean, yeah.
It'd be out of there.
Sure,
It'd be 300 feet away.
Well, there we go. Riddles with Pierce, a
Dennis.
successful endeavor. Great minds over here thinking through math and I guess both of them were math oriented today. Okay. Well, and the other one I had is math oriented too, but we're not going to do that. We'll save that one.
Thank you.
No problem. No problem. All right, so let's make a hard left turn here into some other conversations. We've been, we're in week. We just did week 3 of series Reframing. The whole idea is behind it is how do we live for a never changing God in an ever changing world with everything going on all the time. Culture's changing, things are changing. We know our God doesn't. So what does it mean? How does it look to serve Him, to honor Him, to glorify Him when everything's going on all the time? And there's a lot of answers to that. So we wanted to be specific, like, okay, in specific areas, what's that look like? And so you've spent the last 2 weeks with parenting, which is really cool. But even as someone who doesn't have kids, it's been really, really enjoyable for me to, because I'm in a different phase than both of you. And that's why we want to talk about it on here, because you talked about the phases of parenting, and I wrote them down here. You've got the phase of, and you can go, by the way, you can go listen to the message. It's on our website, YouTube, and the podcast, wherever you get your podcast, it's all over there, but you can go listen to it. But discipline is 0 through 5. Yeah. This is, you have the importance, you wrote in there, kind of the importance of family rhythms and things like that.
What we do.
Yeah. Then this kind of second phase was training. This is ages about 5 through 12, where you're trying to, through compassion, win the child's heart. That you talk through all of that. Encourage you.
Yeah,
also
the
go
why
listen
we
to
do
that.
what we do.
Mm-hmm. And then coaching is 12 through 17. This is a big shift in how someone would parent. This is where it kind of, you become a little bit more hands off and you move toward coaching. And in this phase,
how we do what we do.
How we do what we do. And in this phase, trust is so critical. I like how you really brought that out and kind of keeping communication open. By the way, we should do a talk on communication coming
I think
up.
we need to talk on communication. Dennis, do you think we need to talk on communication?
Yes, we do. Let's communicate.
All right, cool. And also in there, you threw a little shot at me. I don't know what that was about.
It was a good shot, though.
It was accurate. Yeah.
It definitely fit in the theme. Go listen to it. You can
go listen to it if you don't know what the shot is. And then the last phase is friendship, 18 plus as they get older and into adulthood. They just need really your support more than anything through this time. So.
Yeah, and it's definitely for parents, it's a release of control.
Yeah.
So that's like the main thing, is like they need support now. That's how your role shifts.
Yeah. Yeah. And so those are the phases, and we are all in different phases. Pierce, you have
2 kids, 4 and 2, in the discipline years.
Discipline years. And Dennis, where are you at?
I have 3 children and a bunch of grandchildren, and 3 great grandchildren. So I'm like I was thinking the other day, there has to be another phase for me to be in, although that final one is it said plus, so
yeah,
I'm in the plus.
18 plus, yeah. you're deep into that plus sign. And me personally, I'm the fun uncle. So I can, depending on who I'm with, I can help parents navigate each one of these and be a support system in all of those. But you brought it out in the kind of the coaching phase, 12 through 17, which is the age group I work with primarily.
Yeah. And the ones that I worked with too.
Yeah, having important godly influences in their lives. And that's why you brought me up in there. But yeah, what other thoughts did you have on that? Because I know you had... Yeah, you really want to talk about it on here because you can only fit so much into a 40-minute sermon.
Yeah, and that's the hard thing. The first thing that I really wanted to talk about in this is the reality as for most people in our church is if, the way that this talk could go is like you could be left with saying, well, I didn't do this. I didn't start building these rhythms when they were in the 0 to 5 age. I didn't start.
Yeah, so what the heck do I do now?
Yeah, what do I do now? And that's kind of like where I want it in this conversation to really opens up to you two is like, there's a lot of grace in parenting, and there's a lot of, there has to be in this. There should be. But I think it's more grace for ourselves because that was the tension I really wanted to bring out yesterday was that for a lot of parents, we really feel bad sometimes about how we parent. And
there's no shortage of places on the internet that you go to and everything you're doing is wrong.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I wanted to mention that up at the right front here is that with parenting is even if you didn't do these things when they were little, the best place to start is now.
Yeah.
And, but this is where a lot of times we see it especially in youth ministry, you see it is people were laxed early or they didn't do these things and then they swing the pendulum to the other side.
So, yeah.
And then they really constrict on it and really put all these things in place, and so your kids are just bound to break. And so the thing that I really want to as we open this up is for us in this, even if you never started when they were little, what is a healthy habit now? What is a spiritual discipline now that you could do as a family if you're wanting to teach them what it looks like to build on the foundation? It requires for us to first build for ourselves. We have to believe it for ourselves, but how do we begin putting things in habits? That's where habits come into play. And I asked Dennis about coming and joining us because you're the one who's done this. You've been through the stages. Again, I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and for example, today I got peed on by my 2-year-old, so I had to change my pants. So
that's what he said. That's what he says.
Today. Yeah.
To be clear, that's what he says happened. Yeah, his 2-year-old peed on him.
We know. Yeah. Well, you were just describing me because. In our initial parenting time, I'd gotten out of the military and pretty rough around the edges spiritually, and I got to thinking, okay, first thought, we got to get back into church. Well, being raised in a church, you learn some things, but when my wife Sandra and I kind of looked at each other and came to that, we got to be doing this God's way. Well, it was a lot of intention, but not well informed. Yeah. So, like you were saying, you get in there and say, well, we got to do this, we got to do that, we got to do this. And for the children, they had not seen that before. So what was really key was when we sat down to dinner, we didn't used to do these things. Now we're doing them. Yeah. Why? Yeah. And to be able to answer that question that because we want to please God and then kind of backfill that with a relationship with God and how do we live this out? So we it was kind of like my old green truck. When getting her started was a little bit lumpy and sputtering, and but we managed to get going, and it was we had to think creative because when you have children, you have to keep them involved. we can run off of, yeah, we have to do that, we should be doing this, but they're sitting there, they're on the train, but they didn't necessarily buy a ticket.
Oh, yeah.
So, but as we started to format our parenting skills, and we were trying to stay ahead of what we needed to do. I have some parenting axioms that I even now as I counsel parents, and that there are some things that you have to understand or you're going to crash.
Well, maybe I had a question now since we're in here. You mentioned it. You mentioned like your kids, like they had basically were on the train, but they never bought the ticket, because essentially the idea is that like you bought the ticket for them. Like, this is what we're going to be about. How old were your kids when they're getting back in church? How old were your kids there, just for reference?
They were all in grade school.
So elementary.
So they would have been, let's see, right in those first two breaks that you said. You described, the zero to five. We had one that was, I guess she was right on that borderline, and then the other two were in the second phase of.
So they're in the thick of the training years.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So what was like the biggest like resistance that you like, because I'm not there yet. I'm about to be, and right now my son loves coming to church. Like, what was the biggest like resistance that you felt about, like, since they're on a ride now they never bought a ticket for, because I think a lot of our parents probably feel that, like they're feeling this pushback from their own kids. Like, so what do you think that was the biggest hold up for them?
I think, why are we doing this? Is this just something churchy to do? Because we were there was more of a comprehensive reformatting of our spiritual direction, our rethinking our worldview, a number of things
reframing
really going on with us. And it was they were kind of, well, all right, and they were looking at the things that we were doing, and one of the things that in my own life when I was younger was the appreciation for the Bible. Well, as you get older, you have to, okay, why the Bible? Yeah, there's a number of questions, and trying to anticipate those questions so that you can keep the momentum going. And one of the things as we got in that particular phase, the training phase, take that for example, one of my axioms is form flexible habits. And by that I mean, okay, we're going to pray.
What's an axiom?
An axiom is a rule that superintends all other rules.
Oh, and, gotcha. Okay.
And so,
sorry, just helpful.
The goal is to teach and encourage prayer. Well, the example that you used in the in your talk yesterday, you're talking about getting some feedback from your child. Okay, well, they're getting the verbiage.
Oh, during the bedtime prayer.
Right.
Yeah. They're
getting the verbiage, and then at some point in time, you're going to have to expand that. Okay, well, what do those words mean, and why are they significant? And so the flexibility, you have the same goal. Okay, to encourage prayer. Okay, well, the prayer that would be appropriate for 0 to 5 is not going to be sufficient when you get in the next phase. Mm-hmm. And then you go to the coaching phase. All right, how's this going to work? So you want to form the habit of prayer, encouraging prayer, but you have to examine how you're doing it at each one of those phases.
Yeah, and with like the prayer aspect of it, like for me, like this is my mindset coming into it. Of course, I'm starting young with this with our kids, and so we're trying to intentional. But the way I use the prayer thing, I think is a great example because it's an easy, tangible thing. to be able to learn. And because often people are like, I don't know how to pray, and they really struggle with that. And but then like just learning kind of the ideas of that. And I've really realized, because part of my prayer for my kids was Colossians 3:12, that therefore as loved ones put on compassion, kindness, gentleness. That's where I want it. But then like for my son, he's not going to understand compassion right now. Right. But he can understand being kind. He can understand being brave. And so part of like my prayers, I've been saying these same things over him. So that way, when we get to the training phase, I've already kind of started it now, because he started going to like a Mother's Day out. And hey, when you go to school, because we say the same prayer every night, is that they pray that they become strong, kind, brave, and caring. That's the same thing we say every single night. And so when Kai first started school this year, I said, hey, when you go to school, Mom and Dad's not going to be with you. So I want you to be strong. And can you be strong? So I made him flex his muscles. And then I was like, hey, if you see someone who's sad, I want you to, be a friend to them. So I want you to be kind. And then they'll say, hey, brave, and be like, if someone doesn't want to play with you, or maybe you get your feelings hurt, or someone makes you sad, like, it's okay. You can be brave, because of course, as a 4-year-old, that's hard to understand. But then caring, like if you see someone get hurt, help them up, get a teacher. And so like, some of these things early, whereas the prayer, you might not realize how it's soaking in, but that's like how we're going to make the connection to the training phase, is for us, like, this is our goal. We want strong, kind, caring, and brave men eventually. Like, this is what we're trying to do. But I think one of the hard things I think people might experience, and you kind of alluded to this, is, if you're trying to make the habit of prayer, and then like, hey, we're all suddenly going to start doing this now. I think a lot of the kids wrestle, especially in the training years, is like, wait a minute, you haven't ever been prioritizing this. And so it's like, now we're like snapping back over to here. Like, I don't like that. That's a tension I think a lot of parents feel. So what are some things that you did, or maybe now reflecting back, that you could have done to maybe help alleviate this, like this feeling, like the snap, like all of a sudden, like this jerk, basically, that we have to basically, if you have a parent who's wanting to start this, what is a healthy thing you could do maybe tomorrow to begin starting that?
I think one of the things that I've done at several points in my parenting is learned how to do repair work.
Oh, yeah.
So, for example, why are we doing this? And then to explain age appropriately prayer. So, we really didn't pray very much when I was growing up, or, something like that. And see, it's very important if we're because we're talking to God. And so what you're doing is kind of blending the content with relevance, which is kind of that's at the second rule, the second axiom, is to build relationship through applying biblical truth. One of the things that I noticed in your talk at different places, there was you used Matthew 7, and where it says the wise man wasn't wise just because he heard the words.
Yeah,
and puts into practice.
He puts them into practice, and unless they hear why you're doing it, why you're putting it into practice, and seeing that you're doing that, so you're not only giving them the content and showing how it's relevant, you're modeling it for them.
They're not just hearing, do as I say, not as I do. They're watching you do it. And that's what I've learned as well, how important the why is behind what you're doing. So not just like, hey, we're going to do this now. Let me explain why we believe prayer is important. Why gathering with the church on Sunday is important. All that,
and that's
so big.
That leads into the idea of consistency. That again, the habit that this isn't just something we do on occasion or when we feel like it. You form the habit to do it, and then so they know not only what to do, but why you're doing it. Like Jeremy, to your point, why is this important in my life? What how is this going to help me relate to God better?
Right.
Yeah, and I was thinking about another thing. I feel like I keep grilling you on this, but you're the experienced one here. And so you mentioned like repairing the relationship, and anybody in any stage, like right now, for like for my kids, repairing the relationship, like if I spout out anger towards them, like they're not really going to understand. Like I still apologize because I want to model that to them, but especially for people like maybe with like 5, 6, like up like 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe they like go in this and they have to go to their child and says, hey, I messed up here. What does like the repairing the relationship look like for like those in the training years, maybe those from the high school years? And I know, Jeremy, you work with students, so if you want to chime in on the repairing the relationship aspect, but just since you've been through it, what are the, I'm not saying asking for examples, but were there times where what that looked like and how long it took maybe?
Well, I think I will give you an example. I had grandkids and kids at this time, and I was talking to my son, and I can remember a time, some times when I parented out of anger, and I brought that up. I said, I did this wrong, and I asked for your forgiveness. And, of course, we talked with, I said, that really did not reflect Christ, and I gave you wrong information, and I own my stuff and put it in, and I didn't just apologize. I asked for forgiveness, because apology just, kind of expresses how I feel. Forgiveness is a relational tool, because when I asked him for forgiveness, okay, I put the ball in his court, and, of course, he could have said, I'm, thanks, Dad, and I do forgive you, or he could have, responded in different ways, but I needed for him to understand that I'm not perfect, and your point of reference is not primarily me, it's the Word of God. And so if we're going to, and of course, I'm talking to an adult at that point.
Yeah, but the anger was previously in their childhood.
Right,
yeah.
and sometimes you get those insights later in life, and so when you're talking with your children, in fact, I shared with you that at one point in time, I saw my youngest daughter doing something that I did when I was parenting her, and it was not a good habit, and she kind of glanced up and saw me there, and she says, "Oh no, I've become my father." That was frightening, because
sure, it's a little convicting too.
Oh, it was, because the way she was doing it was the way I did it that was wrong. So we kind of had to do a little daddy-daughter discussion.
What's powerful about those two examples is that, one, you went back to them, but like especially with the asking your son for forgiveness for those things back then, is like I think it really does model, because the whole idea of like when we do take things too far with our kids, I think a lot of parents, and maybe it's because my parents did this, and then and sometimes I do it with my kids, I just kind of brush it on the rug, like, listen, they're my kids, I don't have to apologize. But like this idea of like going to them and saying, listen, I'm sorry I took this too far. And like, because essentially, like, I know this was as an adult, but you're modeling forgiveness to them, especially for kids in the early years, is like, this is how I'm restoring the relationship and modeling. Because if we think about our relationship with God, like, how do we restore the relationship? God's not the one who broke it. We damaged the relationship in our sin, but we go to him and we say, God, I'm sorry. I want to make this right. And then he's like, I've forgiven you, and it's done. And so like, especially in the early years, like we're modeling to them repentance, and making things right when we take things, because again, we're, as flawed human beings, we're trying to reflect Christ likeness, especially as fathers. Like you have to, your model, and that's kind of what we talked about 2 weeks ago, is this love and discipline, and that we, in our love and our discipline, has to model, we're modeling the heart of God to our kids. And after that talk, I had a lady come up to me and was saying, I remember very vividly, and to this day I still apologize to my daughter about this, and she says, Mom, I've already forgiven you. And so I pushed her on that. I said, listen, God's forgiven you. He doesn't remember. He keeps no records of wrongs. And so like, he's forgiven you. You're as white as snow. So don't, and she's like, I still regret it though. And I was like, I can't help you feel better about that. But, but that's the way that often both parents and kids can feel is like, especially in like once you get to adult and you're reflecting back, it's like, man, like the fact that the Lord revealed that to you, like, I'm sorry, and you went to them. I think you're modeling repentance, even for you're well into the adult phase with your kids. Like, you're still modeling to them, even, you know, older, that, hey, I'm restoring this relationship. I want to fix this and be to the idea of a thriving relationship with you, because one, you sacrificed for that kid, and you poured your life into that kid, and now you get to see them doing that, and so you want to do everything you can to make the relationship right. So I think that's an aspect that's cool.
That's something I've had to do even with the students at times, is ask for forgiveness, and they're not even my kids, you know, but I see them as kind of a form of my own children in a way.
They take a lot of your time, and
they
they're
do.
like part of your life, you know.
Yeah, and you know, watching them grow up. I've got some students now that I moved here 9 years ago that I remember very vividly.
I just
when
did
they
a
were real
wedding
little.
of one of my former students.
Yeah,
it's a surreal moment.
Yeah, and stuff like that. You know, I haven't after the fact, I haven't like gone back like to students that are gone, but like when we're in students, I've had to apologize collectively for certain things, but I just know that how big my youth pastor was in my life, and how like he modeled so many things for me, and I have a chance to do that for them then. So my asking for forgiveness isn't performative, but in a way it's modeling, and so I have to, if I want them to be followers of Jesus that are going to honor the King and love those around them, I have to show them what that looks like too, and not just at home. That's part of the partnership between, you know, home and the church. Is the church, the parents at home are hoping I'm reinforcing some of the same things that they are at home, and so
even in you know, we're talking specifically about parenting, but the habit, as you mentioned, Jeremy, whether it's with your ministry team or your spouse, or even at work, yeah, if you want to get open the eyes of some of the people with whom you work that may not know Christ, you know, ask when you do something wrong, ask for forgiveness,
dude. That's one of the biggest things, man.
All of a
real.
sudden, you know, where'd that come from?
Yeah.
Because at work, the general paradigm is, oh, well, we just, like you said, brush it under the carpet. We excuse it.
Yeah, because work, it becomes real. You know, because it's one thing to sit in a sermon and hear those things, be like, oh yeah, I could do that. And then you're at work, and then something happens where like you when you wrong somebody, you screwed someone over at a shift. You know, like, and then you're like, hey, that wasn't good for me. That's when it becomes real. It's like, it's because it's easier to play the victim, for sure. Like when someone's wronged me, I want them to come to me, but I for sure do not want to go to them.
Here's the reality with stuff at work, is there, for a lot of us, we don't really have to care about those relationships as much, because we go home at the end of the day to the people that really matter to us, quote unquote, right? But when you can show people that they matter, and they matter enough for you to admit that you were wrong and try to work on that relationship, dude, you're going to get so much further with people there in a way that matters, not just be like, so we got more friends, but in a way that matters toward pointing them towards Jesus. Like that goes from personal experience. I can attest that, like, being willing to model some of these things that you're working on with your kids to your coworkers, mainly you to me, Pierce, is what I'm trying to get at. I'm kidding.
That's his pastor's talk. We're trying to address my behavior towards you.
Yeah, that's really what we're doing here. I was trying to not say it specifically, but I can't hold back anymore. But no, that goes a really long way with people, just in general. So these aren't just principles for your kids; they're principles, you know, outside of that. But obviously, when you apply them to people you live with all the time, it becomes even harder. Like your kids, like your family.
And that's the tension too, for if you're listening and you're like, man, I haven't done everything I needed to, is like your kids see you and you know you, and you know the times that you failed and the times that you've fallen short and you lashed out, or you acted in a behavior that wasn't Christ-like. And so then it's like they see that.
Yeah.
And so then it's like,
and we all remember a time, like, I don't know when it happened for you guys, but there's a time when we realize, oh, our parents aren't superheroes and they're not perfect. Maybe they did some stuff wrong. There's a point in our life where we all realize that. And then, you know, I get to 35 and be like, oh, I was like 10 when my dad was as old as I was. And I'm like, how did he had no idea what he was doing. No one does, we just kind of figure it out as we go. And why would we try to pretend to keep up a facade with our kids? That like, I want them to think I'm a superhero and perfect as long as possible, when I can go ahead and just break that paradigm for them, ahead of time, and show them what being a real parent and real like modeling Jesus looks like.
I need forgiveness and grace every single day of my life.
Yeah.
Now I understand there's an aspect of like, hey, you need to control like authority and like for your kids and create boundaries for that. But like with this, it's you're here for a purpose for your kids. And that was the quote from the Shepherding a Child's Heart that I read, was like, it's your job as a parent. You must help them see this worldview for themselves, that in him they can only find themselves. And so you have to open their eyes to see how God sees, and so they will do as he says. And that's a hard thing. And to open people's worldview to that, which is why we're doing this reframing thing. It's like, and that's where I built to yesterday, was this whole idea, or this last Sunday, in framing using the Joshua 4. It's like the verse 21, what do these stones mean? And so like when their descendants ask their parents, so it's not even talking about your kids, it's talking about your kids as kids. When they ask them, what do these stones mean? You can tell them this is when, and that passage is like when God stopped the river for Jordan for the Israelites. So it's like your story of deliverance, your story of freedom, your story, basically your testimony of faithfully following Jesus, and sometimes not faithfully following Jesus, can be an impact for them down the road. So when they start going through the teenage years, when it's now you're moving into this is how you do it. You have to coach, and you have to watch them kind of make dumb decisions on their own and have to live with the consequences, but also get to see them like step up and to be able to serve and see some cool parts of it. So there's some control in the coaching years to like, hey, now you got to put into practice what we've been talking about, and they're going to make mistakes. But it's like in this, like they get to watch you like, hey, this is when I messed up. And you might make some of these same mistakes, but I'm still going to love you through these. And so the whole goal, especially in the coaching years, like the 12 to 17, is not to sever the relationship. Because I think a lot of times parents do, because they're so focused on the behavior and they've never won the heart of their kid.
I think that's Tripp's thesis there, that if
Tripp
you're not,
is who wrote Shepherding a Child's Heart.
Yeah, the author of Shepherding a Child's Heart. If you don't get to the heart, if you just get to the head, you can get some information in. But if you don't involve the heart, there's no personal connection with that.
If you just get the head, you'll get behavior modification when you're around.
Exactly, and that's in a sense you're training them to be hypocrites, and we can model that very well, just as if we forget the, to be transparent, to be honest with them.
Yeah, let's give them an example. So like, I was thinking about this. My kids fight over toys every single day, like 7 times a day. And so like, let's say when they get older and they can like talk to us a little bit more, and then they're fighting over a toy, and I'll be like, if I go to like, who had it first? Well, that's the issue of justice, or it's the issue of who's faster. But like, what's at the heart of the issue of them like being greedy over the toys and fighting over the toys is like, it's a heart issue of they're selfish, like,
so you need to reframe.
So I need to
the conversation,
like what it looks like to be a good brother, like what it looks like to share and be kind and caring to those around us. Cause like, again, that's a fighting over toys, which you're like, that's not that, but that's instilling them early. Hey, we're selfish human beings. Like we're fallen. Like that's for sure. And especially you can carry that out to when you get older, but like you have to help your kids see for themselves that what God has for us is good, and it's for our good. And it's for ultimately going to be for his glory, because you're building towards something for his glory. I feel like I interrupted you. You're about to say something, but you said you had 3 axioms.
Yeah, the third one.
Recap. What are the first 2?
Okay, the first one is to form flexible habits.
Okay.
You got to adapt according to the need. And the second one was to build relationships through applying biblical truth, because that will include both the content and the relevance. The third one seems like a no-brainer, but in families, I've put it this way: collaborate with your wife. When children can smell blood, and when it's when they're seeing parents, they're seeing that a crack in that one flash. Guess where they're going to go?
Mm-hmm.
Right to that. Like if you say, no, you're not, you can't do that. Oh, we'll go to mom.
We'll go to mom.
And she'll.
I never asked my dad nothing
Yeah.
because he'd always say no.
Yeah.
Always.
And I got to thinking about that and when I'm doing premarital counseling, that's one of the things that comes up that, you guys got to work together. Your goal is one flesh.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you're going to bring different perspectives to it, but before you get into the heat of battle, you better talk out, okay, where do we want to get to?
Yeah, and
where are we going?
What you're describing is the importance of communication within your marriage, and making sure you're on the same page before going into situations, so that
because you can't be a good parent without
right.
being a good husband, and you can't be a good husband without being a good believer. And so that kind of all like works in together. And going into this, you have to be on the same page in these different things. And you might disagree along the way, but sorry.
Yeah, no, you're fine. There's going to be times that your kids will get different answers between certain things. Like, can I have ice cream after dinner? Okay, that's small stuff, but think a little bit more big picture. You guys should be consistent on your values and how you want to parent. Those are really important things, and that all this ties back together. Like that's stuff you should consider when you're dating, the stuff you should consider and talk about before you get married. How do we line up on these things, and making sure those communication doors are wide open, especially when you start having kids, because I think it's really easy for kids to gain such a central, and I've just seen this having not had them, that kids can gain such a central focus in your marriage that you lose sight of your marriage and you lose sight of one another. And so we
have to remember why these kids exist to begin with.
Yeah. Never.
I mean, like, why are these kids here? Because we're together.
You can't
like the marriage
work.
First.
You can't parent well with a fractured foundation, and the foundation is mom and dad.
Yeah.
And in our practice, Sandra and I, there are things that we've kind of in general agreed on, like, okay, here are things, if they ask you that, great, there's no big deal, but we would always, if something came up, for example, when the girls got close to dating, or they were, those types of things, sometimes they would say something to mom, but mom would relate that. And so that, okay, what are we seeing here? What does this mean? And what are we going to do with it? And that you mentioned earlier, values, the idea of values. If you have that clarified, the values, then you can work from it to the specifics. But if you're always kind of looking at these things, it looks like a patchwork quilt that, okay, well, I don't know where we are. I don't, why did we make this decision instead of that one? Or it makes it very confusing. And then the kids are going to pick that up, and with their sin nature, they'll devolve into something that really is not going to serve them well or honor the Lord.
So one really good thing on your axioms, great axioms, principles, whatever word you want to use. Now the hard part gets in, okay, how do I apply? Now the first one, it was the flexible habits. Okay, how do I apply? What does that really mean? Or the second one of dang it, I'm brain farting. Help me out.
Yeah. The second one is to build relationship by applying biblical truth.
Yes, so that's a really good line. But now probably a lot of people listening, how do I do that? And that's why we've Pierce has been talking about different resources, and one that I think really nails in on those and gives you very tangible things to do is called Habits of the Household, and Pierce is holding it right now, and I know you guys can see that because you're listening with audio only, but
I was just going to list out some of the chapters.
List out some of the chapters, because just even looking through the table of contents, I'm like, oh shoot, this is great.
So it just basically talks about habits of the household. It mentions waking, like, so when kids wake up, what is the first thing that you're going to see and do? The meal times, which is a super helpful practice to start, just be able to focus in, be able to pull distractions from the world, and just be able to say, let's sit at a table together.
Yeah, a family in our church just told me how helpful that's been for them and their marriage and their family to sit down, talk about their highs and lows just around the dinner
just
table
to create
each
a
night.
space, because everyone's so busy, you're torn. Also discipline, which we talked heavily in a couple weeks ago. Screen time, which is probably that one. I read it and I was super convicted during it. I was like, dang, dude, I'm a horrible father. Family devotions and worship time, marriage, work, how we look at work, primarily there, and then how we actually look at play too. Like it's good to have joy in a family. Like that's a low bar but good bar to have joy. But also like conversations, and then bedtime, like how like each of these, there's just some of those.
Yeah.
Like
So looking through that, it is, even if you're just a single couple like Aubrey and I, there's some really helpful things in there just for us. Or an older retired couple, or you're partially retired couple, like Dennis. There's some really helpful things in there. It's not just people with kids. So that book, who's it by?
It is by Justin Whitmell Early.
Okay, I'll link to that in the show notes of this. And if you want to buy that and finances are an issue, please reach out to us. Let us know. info@newstory.church. We'd be happy to help you out with that. Also, the other book we mentioned,
Shepherding a Child's Heart by Ted Tripp.
Yep, we'll put that in there as well. But yeah, just on the practical side of it, on how to live out some of those axioms and other principles that we talk about, that habits is just very bottom shelf. Like, here's something you can do, and it's not just like, here's 1,000 things you got to add to your life to make it more difficult now. But it is going to challenge your priorities. What do I need to prioritize most right now with where my kids are at? And I think that book's really helpful for that.
One of the things that I hear from parents, well, I know we should do, and then fill in the blank, but we're so busy. We have
The
this,
kids are
we have
tired.
that. The kids are tired. The kids have to do this, or or my work schedule is crazy. And I think we've mentioned before, we take time for what's important.
Yeah.
And by those choices, we're going to train our children to make choices, and they're going to look a lot like what we choose.
Yeah. What do you want them to walk away with more than anything as you're thinking about their future, and as much influence you can have on it? What do you? And so that's gonna influence the priority question, because it is like, oh, we got all this stuff going on, we're always so busy. It's like, well, why are you so busy? It's just a good question to ask yourself. I'm not saying to change your whole life up and everything, but it's a question you got to ask yourself. Why are we so busy? Are we doing things that are going to help prioritize some of these? Is it really going to help us point our kids toward Jesus above all? Hopefully that's your goal, right? But that's
one of my wake up calls was when my children got in their teen years, and they started making some decisions, in that the counseling phase that was mentioned. I was starting to see them go a particular way that was not going to serve them well in following Jesus. And rather than, jump on them and say, hey, don't do that anymore, I did a timeout. Okay, what's moving this? There's always influence, and like you said, we move from very directive, little kids, do this, pick up, clean your room, to influence. Like with my grandchildren, sometimes they'll say something, I say, where'd you get that idea? That's kind of an intriguing thought, and then bring that out to they may believe something that's not true, and they've picked it up. There's somebody's going to fill in the blank for them, and is it going to be God's word, or is it going to be something else?
Yeah. And we just want people who build like wise builders and puts into practice what we believe. And so if we truly believe that like what God has for us is good, and it's an abundant life, not just a happy life, because if you're a believer of Jesus, that life isn't happy all the time. But it's like, especially in those moments when things are really hard, how you handle adversity, how you handle grief, how you handle those hard things for your kids see you do that. And so, and how you navigate what life throws at you, I think your kids will soak that in and they'll see it. And And the goal is then in turn to disciple them, to be able to show them that, like, hey, there is a way forward.
Yeah.
I think one of the, from my perspective now, is to kind of look back, and we have our older grandchildren. I've got 30-year-old and upper 20-year-old grandchildren.
I'm 28,
and they'll every now and then they'll call and Grandpa, hey, I got this going. They'll kind of talk about.
You're kind of like a counselor, librarian. You're kind of like, you're like a wealth of knowledge for them, and they're trying to.
And they say, oh, what, I got this going on. One grandson kind of looking at relationships, how to do it God's way, and another one's kind of wrestling around with some more philosophical, theological questions, and be able to just listen and, okay, what's going on here, and not necessarily give them the answer, but help them learn how to find the answer.
Yeah. I had one more question for you guys, from just kind of my standpoint of not having kids. How important has the role been for you, Dennis, and how important is the role for you, Pierce, of having other influences in their lives, whether other Christian men and women, Christian influences in their lives? How important has that been, and how important is that to you? Of like, what do you hope comes of that? Why is that important? All that good stuff.
I think the most important thing, and I'm not just going to try to sell this church for a second, but I will, is because so much for our boys is we wanted our kids to be loved on and cared for when they went somewhere. So, when we were praying about moving closer to home, and, because that's what we prayed for, then, God wants to hear desire. We prayed to be closer to home. We were praying about churches, and we applied to some other churches, but always our filter was, is this a place our kids are going to be loved on and cared for? And that was like the primary thing that like if we felt led somewhere, like that was the first thing we were thinking through, is our lens of our kids. And so when we came here, how loved our kids felt, like people loved on our kids, and we were like, yeah, this is where we need to be. And so because I know, because I was a youth pastor for a long time, and I remember speaking to our students and saying, when I had kids, my thought on ministry shifted tremendously. Because the work I'm doing now, and I told my students, the work I'm doing now is one day you're going to be ministering to my kids. Like theoretically, that age group is going to be the ones who are being their youth leaders. And so I knew, then it shifted for me. I want to build healthy and strong leaders for my kids and how I ministered. And so I want to put other kids or other leaders in my kids' lives. Yeah. And so seeing, you and Aubrey love on my kids means the world to us. Seeing just people when we come to church and seeing my kids run around acting goofy and just oh my gosh, look at that red hair, it's just fun to watch. People love on my kids, and just because they know what I know, the church, they'll come to know is that the church is a place for people to connect, and it should be displaying Christ's love. So I hope that one day when they think of the church we're in, they think, man, those people loved on me. Yeah. They supported me. Yeah. And as I have a 4 and 2-year-old, I hope when they look back in 30 years from now and they can say, man, we went to the same church and those people loved me, and they could think back, because I think back to people in my own life. Yeah. My small group leaders who I was in 14, 15, 16-year-olds who, poured into me. So I just want, for those who don't have kids, or those who or even with other kids, I want my kids to feel safe and loved on by not just people from me, but Christ-like people, so it's just, that's been the most helpful thing. Yeah.
I think for me, at my stage of life, as the nest is just pretty much empty, is watching where they're going. And, I got one son, looking around after his studies. He's going to go here, and just talking with him. Oh, what churches around there, what, and to listen, what are they looking for?
Yeah.
Are they looking for a group where there's accountability and there's good Bible content, and relationships? Just to comment on New Story, those are questions that we ask ourselves as a pastoral staff. Are we providing biblical input that's going to guide our congregation? Are we encouraging them to serve and to be involved and fully connected with it, or just are we just going to go kind of a perfunctory attendance at some church, go in and do stuff and listen to them as they're making those choices? And again, there's that idea of trust. We've worked hard to build, when they ask us something, can they trust the information that we're giving them? And are they, why this church and not that church? So being able to point to those things, for the kids, none of our grandkids, we have one grandchild that has some children, but being able to guide them and say, what do you want for your kids? What kind of an environment do you want for your kids? So I'm not telling them. I want to just keep that in front of them, so they take responsibility.
Yeah, it's cool. You're on the back end now, to where you help to raise their parents, and now you are getting to be kind of that influence that they allow into their kids' lives. And I think that's beautiful. It's really cool.
Since we're going for transparency, I'm a lot better grandparent than I was a parent. It took a little while to figure out what was going on, and now I'm kind of enjoying the rewards of the input.
I had two thoughts, and I guess we almost done. But part of my desire for our kids, if I could summarize in a sentence, I want to raise strong, kind, brave, caring boys that love God, love others, and love the church. Like that's my goal, like for parents, and I want to keep that at the forefront for me and Alex. Is like that's what we want. But then I had the thought about for you when you're talking about like I'm a lot better grandparent than I was. Part of what is so impactful for those, if you are a grandparent, is to help us raise our kids. And it's like help us reinforce the things. Don't just like part of the things that I think I saw a lot of times with my grandparents maybe is they would like just break my parents' rules all the time. And they let us do whatever we wanted. And it's like, and just, they would always say the phrase, don't tell mom and dad. And so it's like, maybe as a caution, and
don't do that.
It's, sometimes it's fine. Like if you want to get, like we say, hey, don't give them ice cream, you give them ice cream. Okay, it is what it is. Yeah. But like, the thing, especially with it, is parenting is hard and it's challenging, and there's going to be a whole bunch of more challenges to face. And as my kids get older, it's going to get a whole lot harder. Yeah. But the things of God is the thing I wanted to keep teaching, like just for all of us, we want to set our minds on things above, not things below. So grandparents, parents, aunts, uncles, teachers, mentors, coaches, if you're a Christ follower, help us to teach on things above, not things below.
Yeah, I think that for those, you've mentioned the people that maybe got off to kind of a lumpy start and they're kind of wondering how to do that. If you're having parenting questions, we'd be glad to partner with you and just sit down. Okay, well, here's where you are, and how can we get to where the Lord would have you to be, and then just talk with them. Maybe there's some skill set or some stuff. Sometimes people will habituate something that's not really helpful, and they don't even realize that there's a time when anger. Okay, I can get a result with it, but sometimes talking with them, coaching. So that works in your family, and that's why we're here as a pastoral staff to be able to help you raise those children, like you said, Pierce. raise the kind of children that's going to honor the Lord.
Yeah, we say that stuff whenever we do, parent-child dedications here at church. Is where the adage of it takes a village, and we take that seriously.
We're starting a partnership, and we're promising to go with you.
Yeah, for me and my wife, we'd love our own, but where we're at right now is we're just going to be really good, try to be really good aunts and uncles to the kids around us. And so right now we have some real nephews, and then we have a lot of adopted in nephews and nieces that we just love being able to love on and point towards Jesus. So my hope is that I'm never any sort of hindrance to people's ability to raise their kids well and in the church, and I can just partner even in small ways of just showing them even more what Jesus looks like through my actions. And so if you're a single person out there, if you're someone who just doesn't have kids, you have a really cool opportunity to show kids what Jesus looks like, even in your place in life. It does not take you having kids to begin parenting the kids around you, because, spoiler alert, you kind of are when you interact with them. So that would be my last thoughts. You guys have anything else you wanted to add on there?
No, I don't. I do, but it's we get off into some. I don't need to. That's okay.
It's all right.
I think we've talked about a lot of things, a lot of relationships and resources, and I think just maybe in closure, don't lose hope. There were times parenting can be discouraging, single parenting, super discouraging, and each of us are going to be working out of certain context. There's hope. We have it printed on the end of our building.
Hope for a new story in Jesus.
That's it. And if you get discouraged, let us know. We want to.
We're here. I'm excited for where, while we're done with kind of the parenting aspect of the series, I'm excited for where we're going with it still, because a fresh perspective, a biblical perspective, is necessary in a lot of other areas too, of in our ever-changing culture. How can we continue to live for this never-changing God? It takes a perspective shift. And so we're going to be talking about marriage. We're going to be talking about communication, manhood, womanhood, friendship, just dating, a lot of things, and how a kind of reframing our perspective with a biblical lens can absolutely change our life and change the outcome. And most importantly, honor the King and his kingdom. So, I'm looking forward to it. Stoked for where we're headed. But as for now, we're finished up, right? Any other?
No.
And we're good. Okay.
Sounds
All right.
good.
We're good. I think we're how far? Yeah, we're about an hour in. We can kill it, but we got plenty more time to be able to talk on the pod coming up. So we hope to do a few more episodes as we go through kind of each of these big topics and talk a little bit further on them. Because again, we only get a short time each week, and this gives us a little bit more opportunity to talk through some stuff. So check the show notes for any links and stuff in there. But as for now, this has been the New Story Podcast, or Equip Podcast, equipping you to live out your Christian life as you faithfully love God and love others with truth and grace. So let's go do it.